And welcome back in to another new episode of Tribal Council Chat. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller,
Thanks for calling out.
and let's dive in. So, episode 2 of Survivor 46.
It's really interesting last night. Any overall thoughts, Bruce, before we get into it?
Yeah, this is a weird episode. I liked it. It was fun, but there was also a lot of stuff that I didn't like. This episode kind of had this meanish, like mean middle school feel to it, both with the stuff on Nami with Venus being completely isolated and nobody talking to her for a while, and twice now into I'll get to the immunity idol thing when we get there, but all that going on. And then on another tribe, we have somebody who's a clear boot that they give a fake idol to while just kind of chuckling and laughing at her missteps when she's not around. I don't know. This episode had a really weird feeling to it. Not a great episode for Soda, I don't think, either. But
Before we get started, I just wanted to bring something up I saw on Twitter last night when we go into a Players of the episode that I thought summed it up perfectly. And it was Eliza's tweet that I sent you that said Probe says that there's no villains in the future, and that's because we have a whole cast of them right now.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way, because first of all, Probst's no villain comment has gotten taken way out of context, I think. Because basically, the intention
So
behind what he's saying is they're not going to cast people specifically to be villains. They're casting interesting personalities.
Yeah.
Never said they won't cast people that are villains. This is the same way they've been casting it for a while now. Nothing's changing. But all the people that complained about that, now that we have an episode like this where people are being villainous and mean, want to complain about that also. So people just want to complain, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that we're stuck with in, especially both in the US and Canada, where social media is so active, that there probably people with different opinions, because everybody in our culture is entitled to an opinion and can speak it loudly. We get in a situation where literally nobody can agree. And so exactly what it is, it makes politics what it is, it makes economics what it is, it makes the challenge what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And like I have my problems with this episode. I don't like the kind of mean vibe it gives off. I think this was not a good episode for Soda at all. I wrote somewhere in my notes. But there was some really fun stuff about this episode too. I don't want to be super negative about it. I, I,
Let's get into it. Who's your player of the week?
I have Charlie because last week I said like it would be a great move for Charlie to go with the girls, but he's the only guy in a group there that puts him on the bottom of that alliance. He realized that, saw that he needed a ride or die pair that would set him apart. He got that with Maria. We got some Malcolm and Denise flashback scenes. Yeah. And I think he's doing great so far. And the scene with him and Ben with their song battle was absolutely hysterical.
Yeah, that was great. I'm gonna go kind of in the same area for a bit, but I think I'm gonna go with Maria as my player of the week for the same thing that when I think of. Pardon?
That's a solid choice.
Oh, thanks. For the same kind of thing as, like you say, we did get that Malcolm and Denise moment, but I think Charlie's in the spot where it is easier for him in his demographic and age group to go further in this game. And like Denise, who won the game that way, Maria is now in a spot where she has her alliance with the four, and within that, she has her tight alliance with the three girls and a duo with Charlie.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think she's in the best spot right now.
And she has an extra vote, too.
And she's able to She does. And she's also able to overcome that mother/older lady member of the tribe and really seems to be in control.
Yeah, she's doing awesome.
So let's get into the episode. I'll go through the topics that I have. If there's anything that I miss or that you want to go into, by all means, interrupt me. We can get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is getting back to camp and interactions that we see with the rest of the tribe that is Yanu right after um, they vote off the first member of the game, being Zelensky. So, what were your thoughts kind of on the back to camp action, especially between Banu, who I know is your top pick in the draft, as well as Kinsey,
Yeah, I'm not feeling
who
great
was the
about
first overall pick in our draft?
I'm not feeling great about that pick so far. I think if we get a swap, that could change entirely. But Kenzie's
We're not
doing
getting one next week, but I really hope that after three we get a swap because something needs to change up here.
yeah, for the sake of Banu and my winner pick Venus, I'm really hoping we get a swap for both of their sakes. But Kenzie, and we see this scene of her making it look like to Banu that she wants to work with him. And then in the confessional saying, like, yeah, he's not a good liar at tribal. And she's trying to reassure him, and she's being very convincing. And she's really good socially. And I had this written throughout my notes a bunch of times. She's playing way too hard so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on both of these points. I think it's interesting, and I want to get into Kinsey's game in a second. That was the next thing on my notes. But it'll be interesting. I do agree that they a swap would help. I also think that although there seems to be in a bad spot, this tribe has he's not as weak of a player as the other two who went for the early that were elsewhere outside of that alliance. So I definitely think there's a way that Banu could work his way back in to this tribe in the future.
Yeah, and especially because
And at some point, everyone needs an ally.
yeah, and I think he can work his way back in, and we'll see that a little bit as we move throughout the entire episode. We'll see this, but people start to realize what I just said of how hard Kenzie's playing. And I think there's a legitimate shot that even if they lose next episode, she could be the one going home, which
And
works
that's
for
where
us because you're at 18 points and I'm at 17 points, and Kevin hasn't lost anyone from his team yet. So that needs to change.
yeah. And that leads us into our next point, at least that I wanted to go off of, is what do you think within this kind of like power three of Kinsey, Tiffany, and Q, where we see the relationships are? At some point, we see Tiffany and Kinsey seem like a duo. At other points, we're seeing Q and Tiffany questioning Kinsey's strength in the game.
Yeah. And that I was about to say that is the very next scene after this is we see excuse me. Tiffany sees how likable Kenzie is to everyone. And she even says, like, notes that makes her nervous. And the note I have written down here is that Kenzie needs to watch that and make sure she doesn't come off as a threat for being super likable and getting along with everyone like Caleb did in 45 last season. Because everyone picked up on how likable Caleb was and how fun and social he was, and that put a target on him really early. And
I
he
think
was the
that's
first
going to
juror
be,
because of that.
yeah, I think that's going to be very challenging for Kinsey in this game because ultimately, at the end of the day, even outside the game, when she's working with people directly in terms of assisting them with the in her beauty, she's talking to new strangers, getting to know people every single day of life. So what may come off to some as a threat could just be her being herself at
Yeah,
no
for
fault of
sure.
her own.
And I think that's what it is, but in this game, perception is everything also.
Yeah,
and I could see her running into the problem Caleb did last season.
absolutely. All
So
right, so now let's move over to Nami, where you did mention Venus's position and you hoping that there's a swap for her. Um, this tribe dynamic was really interesting, so that's where I wanted to go to next.
yeah, for sure.
What did you think about Venus's ability or lack of ability to really fit in her tribe? And I'm sure we'll get more into this at the immunity challenge.
So this is kind of, and I mentioned earlier that there was a few things that added up for me that just I didn't love this episode for Soda, and this is kind of the beginning of that. But we see early on, we see this montage of nobody talking to her, and someone says it's because Tevin doesn't like her, doesn't trust her, and he kind of, I guess, is in charge somehow. And we've seen nothing between her and Tevin. I don't know how Tevin landed at such a strong position here. He came off kind of weird this episode to me, even though I kind of get where he's coming from sometimes. But the more interesting thing to me is this quote from Soda, where she goes, I was day one with Venus, but the other people here, speaking about Tevin, don't trust her. And if no one else trusts her, she's not a number for me either. And I kind of have conflicting feelings here because, on one hand, it's smart. You need to be adaptable. You don't want to go down with a sinking ship. But at the same time, I mean, it's risky to just completely abandon your ally like this and just be a follower and follow everyone else instead of playing your own game and standing by your ally and trying to play the game. I feel like this is kind of a risky move for Soda a little bit because you're just following whatever Tevin or Hunter or whatever everyone else is doing instead of standing by the person you originally wanted to align with. Other
Yeah,
people don't like her, so you're just going to completely abandon that now. And also,
yeah, I think
right after
so.
that confessional, we see a scene where Venus asks Soda if she wants to chat at all, and Soda just won't even do that. So that's I don't know. I'm conflicted about this because I get needing to be adaptable. You don't want to sink your own game, but you also don't just want to be a follower the whole time either. And I feel like that's what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Um, you ultimately, I guess that's the biggest challenge of pre-merge Survivor is you have to know when to keep your alliance and when to know you might have to get rid of someone that you want to work with in order to make a new alliance that might be more malleable throughout the game, and when you could just simply be acting. And that's where I wanted to get in when we talk about the challenge is I don't know how much of Soda's reactions with Venus is legitimate and how much of it might be her trying to get trust with people who clearly are questioning Venus's loyalty in the game.
Yeah, and I will say, it after the premiere, it looked like Soda and Venus were going to be this tight duo, and my mom made a great comment on the YouTube. So shout out to her when she's watching this. And she said, like, if Venus is the Parvati, does that mean Soda is going to be the Suri? That duo seems to be completely dead, but that might be for the better for both of their games because Soda seems to be bonding with
Yeah.
Tevin really quickly, and we'll get into this later. But Venus kind of found this surprise bond slash alliance in this episode that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card, but I am here for it. So we'll see if this tribe. I don't think they will, but if this tribe ever goes to tribal pre-merge, it's going to be insane because I'm pretty sure all six of them are on the bottom somehow.
You're probably right.
I,
I mean, could you see a scenario that's like 2-2-2?
I could see 2-2 because Tevin and Soda. It looking like Venus and Randon are going to be a thing, and I'm trying not to get into that because that comes up later in the episode. Hunter and Liz are the wild cards. I don't know Liz is giving me Debbie Warner vibes from Co Wrong and Game Changers. And I have that written down in my notes. So we'll get to that later in the episode. But Nami is just such a mess. Like I love it, but I have no idea like what the dynamics are here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. This group almost reminds me of like what could have happened if Luvu went to tribal council in 41.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's move on to Siga. And last week you called them the Vibes Tribe. Michelle talked about the Vibes corner count in the corner.
Yeah.
This is really just continuing on, as this tribe isn't catching fish or building their shelter or looking for idols,
Yeah.
but we have Charlie and Ben trying to see who knows more songs of their favorite artist between a battle of the ages of Taylor Swift versus Metallica.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm pretty sure they called themselves the Vibe Tribe during the premiere also, which is great. But we have before we get to the song battle, couple notes I have here is that Ben just has a golden nugget of a quote here. Where he goes, I can't believe this. I'm crying over making fire. I didn't even cry when I met Nicolas Cage. It's just such a great quote. The Nicolas Cage reference made me laugh. Just that quote felt very on brand for Ben. And then just my other note was that I realized I felt right because I said Charlie realizes he's at the bottom of Charlie's Angels and that he needs a ride or die, which I said on our episode last week. So I just and those of you watching on YouTube, my I buy one buff per season. I bought Siga this season. It came in. This tribe seems like it would be so much fun to be a part of.
Yeah. Easily my favorite tribe so far. I'm really glad that I got last pick and was able to pick Charlie right away.
Yeah, and they're my favorite tribe so far. I think Nami is the most interesting tribe, and then Yanu just after the way they acted this episode, I just not a fan of them so far.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm not really a fan of the whole tribe, but I think there's definitely a lot of talent there that if we do get a swap, Banu specifically, the two of them, I'd be looking forward at being very good players deep in the game.
And I like Banu. He's super positive. Seems like a fun guy. He's terrible at tribal council. And I liked Ken. I like Kenzie in the premiere. I liked her preseason. The thing that bothered me with them is just the fake idol thing was unnecessary, but just kind of the way they talked about Jess behind her back when she wasn't around, and like I don't know, just the vibe of those conversations and little remarks I wasn't a fan of. But back at Siga, and we talked about this a little bit with Player of the Week. Charlie and Maria forming a bond where they're each other's number one. What are your thoughts here?
Like I kind of said at the beginning, I really like this. I think it's smart from both of them. I think it's why each of us have one player here as our player of the week. Um, but yeah, I really like this bond, and I'm looking forward to seeing them go deep in the game. I really think they could be maybe our first two members and showing us. The fact is, production took an effort to show us this bond. It didn't just happen.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
almost making me wonder, like, have we locked in two seats in the finale already?
Maybe.
I don't know, but I would love to see it.
Yeah. And real quick, because I know you're leading us through this episode this week. Quick question that just popped into my mind for you. If Siga does end up having to go to tribal, who's likely to go home? Because they all seem to get along really well. Nobody feels like they're on the bottom.
Let me just think about that. I have a thought in my head. I'm gonna guess Tim, just because I've seen the least of him.
Yeah,
What
which
about
is
you?
if you had asked me this preseason, I would have said Ben because neither of the two of us were very high on him preseason, but we've gotten a lot of content from him so far, and he
Yeah,
seems to be pretty decent socially. People seem to like him really well. So through 2 episodes, Ben has been a lot better than I thought he would be.
I agree. And me saying Tim, I like Tim, but he just seems so far like the kind of player that if he goes, I don't know if anybody is going to really know he's not there anymore from what we've seen yet. He could have a breakout episode in 3, 4, 5 and be a big player this season. We'll find out.
Yeah. So what do you got next?
I wanted to go into the Charlie and Ben relationship.
Charlie. Oh yeah, Charlie and Ben is great. This little song battle is hilarious, where they're just
Say on this topic specifically when you bring up the song battle, why I thought that it was interesting, at least to talk about it in the episode, was the fact that I'm sure you remember back in the draft, me picking Charlie and making the point to say he's a law student and a future lawyer.
mm-hmm.
And you can tell that Charlie is thinking about the game in this way too, the way he thinks as a lawyer, and the way he thinks even in this song battle moment when he says all too well and all too well 10-minute version, count for two different answers.
Yeah,
That is smart.
that's smart. I feel like that may or may not should have counted, but oh well. I have this in
If
my
you're
notes
someone
later.
who's
Huh?
perfect, I'm just saying, if you're someone who's thinking that way, whether it should or should not count, that's a matter of opinion.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
if you're someone who's thinking about things in the abstract and being able to risk losing a song battle on two Taylor Swift songs that are a different length, even though they're the same song originally, it shows you how Charlie is going to visually approach the game. Risks that he might take when it comes to getting an advantage later if he gets sent off on a journey. Those sort of things.
Yeah, and I agree. Just funny note here because I know this is going to amuse me. Is I have this note from here it is from a later Siga scene. I said Charlie says he is a Taylor Swift fan and a giant Star Wars nerd. Are me and Charlie the same person somehow? Because I'm a Swiftie, and then also I am a giant Star Wars nerd. That's one of the things I geek out about the most when it comes to movies and shows. I think me and
That's funny
Charlie
that
might be the same person somehow, like universes,
it's funny that
dimensions
you say
collided or
that
something.
because he also in the same confessional said that he's a big Harry Potter fan, and I said Charlie is a Swiftie and he's a Harry Potter fan. Me being a Michelle fan, is he my favorite player in a male body?
Yeah, and see, I've seen like 2 Harry Potter movies and read none of the books, but man, he got me with Taylor Swift and Star Wars. That's a really weird combination that there can't be that many of us that are huge fans of both. I don't feel like there's a ton of overlap
True.
there. So,
I love it.
so
He's
yeah,
on my fantasy team.
yeah. I don't feel great about as great about my team through 2 episodes as I did when we did our draft episode
Yeah.
because I lost someone this turn, and then another one of my people is on the bottom of that same tribe now. So I could be in
All
last
right.
place really quickly.
So we did already talk about the relationship between um Charlie and Maria. I almost said Malcolm and Denise. And we see what the guys are thinking. Is there anything else you want to bring up here before we go back to Nami?
No, I think we covered it well.
Great. So looking back at the Nami tribe, we see this duo you were talking about Venus and Random,
I love
which
this. And before I get into my notes on that, just going back a little bit, because I have another note here of why is Kevin leading everyone against Venus? What am I missing? I forgot to mention this earlier, but this not only doesn't make sense to me that none of them are talking to her, it's also terrible gameplay, aside from being a bad way to treat someone. If you get to a swap or a merge and you've been treating her this way, she's gonna flip on you and you're gonna deserve it. Like Lil Morris with Andrew Savage back in Pearl Island, who Lil gets voted out, comes back to the same tribe. Savage really doesn't want to give her the time of day. She flips to the other side and he's the merge boot and doesn't make the jury. So moving on is Randon finds the beware advantage, which as we learned last week is there's a key in a box. You get a clue to where the box and the key is once you lose a challenge. And until you have the idol in your hand, you don't get a vote. I'm not sure why, but Randon feels the need to tell someone about this, even though there's nothing he can do about it right now. But for the sake of my winner pick and my rooting interest, I'm happy he did, because he's trying to figure out who he tells, because really he doesn't trust anyone on his tribe, and he goes through why he doesn't trust everyone. And I had notes about it somewhere, but he's going through being like, oh, Tevin and Soda are too close to each other for either one of them to let me in. Liz is, I forget, Liz is a wild card, I think he says. And I'm thinking, watching this, is this an opportunity for Venus to change her situation? And right as I'm thinking that, Randon says the phrase, the person I'm going to trust with this is the person I never thought I would. And I'm like, yes, cool. She gets a chance off the bottom, and he trusts Venus with this. And there seems to be an alliance forming here. And we see a sign of this later in the episode also after the immunity challenge. So,
as you mentioned, Liz, I just want to quickly interject here. Shout out to Liz for her comment on her Facebook page.
oh, for
Glad
sure.
she enjoyed listening to the first episode.
Yeah, Liz watches / listens to our show. That is so cool.
Yeah.
That being aside, because I love her for listening to our show, through the first 2 episodes, she is kind of giving me the same vibes that Debbie does in Co Wrong and in Game Changers. Because last week it's I'm so awesome. I so like it's just she kind of rubbed people the wrong way, whether merited or not, talking about selling her businesses and all this that she's done. And this week, I let me find it. But she's talking about being single or if she'd want to marry again. And basically, the line she says is, a lot of men would want to be with me. I don't think any of them could actually handle it or handle being with someone that makes enough money to where she doesn't need him. And I don't know. I can't really explain why. I get Debbie vibes from her so far.
It's interesting. I personally don't, but I definitely in love to hear your opinion. I think that she's much more game smart than Debbie. I think Debbie was just cast to be a
Yeah.
complete wild card out there who would literally do anything that didn't make any sense. I
And
think Liz is very well thought out and accomplished, and I really enjoy watching her.
and I'm not making a 1-to-1 comparison. Everything you just said is completely right. When I say Debbie, I pretty much mean that like the sitting around at camp talking about here's how much I've done, here's how great I am. And in the case of this one, she didn't say it explicitly last week. She did this week. Here's how much money I have. It's a lot. And
Yep.
in both cases, all that self talk and self promotion kind of rubs people the wrong way. Now, with Debbie, it goes beyond that. It's wanting
That's
to
what I
tell
was saying.
everyone else how to do things, also. But like the same
With
thing is
Debbie,
there.
my first thoughts are Brad Culpepper told me to you do the balance beam in the challenge, and I'm like, no, he didn't. You did.
Yeah, because she used to be a gymnast or whatever. Like I
Yeah,
said, not a 1-to-1 comparison at all. Just that one little aspect there of
fair enough.
constantly talking about how great you are and the things you've done. And it seems to
Yeah.
not be rubbing her tribe mates very well. But that kind
Mhm.
of led to our Randon and Venus duo, which I've talked a lot lately. So, what are your thoughts on this duo forming here? Because none of us saw this coming, I don't think.
It's no, I didn't either, but it's an interesting duo. We'll see what goes with it. I guess my thought that's interesting is surrounding this beware advantage. I want to ask you if you've considered this as a possibility. The rule is that Brandon or Landon, I mean, there's a lot of names that are so close to other names in this season.
Mm-hmm.
Landon is the rule states that he can't vote until his tribe loses a challenge where he has the opportunity to find the idol, right?
Yeah.
So maybe just thinking from when we talked about China with Toddle recently, and we've gone a lot into that season. But what do you think the chance is that there's some sort of pre-merge twist in this game where players could be stolen onto other tribes only to not have a vote because they've technically their tribe has never lost?
See, with the new era, I really won't like. I don't feel like I can just completely discount anything because the new era is just weird and wild and has produced things like Do or Die and change history. But I feel like that's pretty unlikely. We haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah.
It'd be
Well, we
great
also
TV
didn't see
though.
an option for a long time until last season.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. I just want to, before we get into the challenge, talk a bit about like go back to Yanu, and I want to talk about Jess's position in the tribe because I don't think we really touched on her all that much, and we see this come up where clearly after the last vote, she's feeling a bit on the outs of her tribe.
Yeah. And I real quick note, shout out to Liz because her husband's from St. Louis. So that that was really cool to hear. And like I get why she's on the bottom and that, throughout the days portraying the premiere episode, she was not able to sleep, not super helpful with the physical jobs around camp, it doesn't seem. And just overall small stature, small size. And when it's pre-merged, you should be voting people off based on what will keep you away from tribal. And voting Jess out does that, unfortunately. But she's a super likable person, and like I would have liked to have seen her go a little bit farther. I thought she was going to do a lot better based on the pre-merge, not pre-merge, pre-game release stuff and the cast release. I still feel like if she were to come back, she could do better than she did this time. But yeah, I don't really have a ton to say there. Her being on the bottom makes sense, unfortunately.
I agree. I think she just finds herself in a bad situation when it comes to lacking some social ability and not getting into that majority early on, and unfortunately is where she is.
Yeah. There's yeah. So are we moving on to the challenge?
We are moving on to the challenge. Which did you recognize what I recognized from this challenge right off the bat?
What was that?
That it was a interesting enough note, at least from what I picked out. This challenge was featured in Australian Survivor, at least for the first time I saw it.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
So Hoops may have said after Adams' idle attempt with the fleur de lis on the podium that he doesn't watch any international seasons of the game, which I'm inclined to believe. But clearly, there's some people in senior production that are watching the international versions of the game in order to pick up elements, just as we've seen some say challenges in Survivor come from the challenge, or vice versa.
Yeah. And I do, but aside from that really cool note, I do have a couple weird notes from before the challenge. If they see Yanu for the first time, Probe says Jelensky was voted out, and mostly Nami, I think. There may have been Siga involved in this too. I don't remember ever seeing this before, but what they do is they kind of all start laughing and making fun of Jelensky, who's already been voted out. Somebody says the phrase last name first out. Someone else asked Yanu if they had several reasons to vote him out because he thought several meant seven. And like funny lines, but like what are we doing here? We're making fun of somebody that's already gone, not even gonna hear you. I don't remember ever
Yeah,
seeing anything like this before.
yeah, agree. I mean, yeah, definitely not amongst people that have been out, and especially in a newbie season. Like we've certainly seen some backhanded jabs between Poe and Sandra before, let's say, but that was all winners. These people have been friends for decades.
Yeah, and last season an Australian survived, and I haven't watched any of the current season, but we definitely got some pre-challenge moments from George in Australian Survivor Heroes versus Villains. But even that's different because Jonathan will do pre-challenge questions like it's tribal council in a way that
Yeah,
Probst doesn't.
yeah.
And then the weirdness before this challenge doesn't stop there for me though, because somebody from Yanu, I want to say it was Banu, says something about like we're fired up, we're ready to come out and start firing. And like we start having these tribes trash talk each other. And there's a lot of it that goes back and forth, but I remember Soda saying, like, yeah, I'll finish this right now. How's the food over there? Which is one of the other things that just really just I felt like this wasn't an episode she came off really well in. But this whole little scene also, like I also don't remember ever seeing something like this before either.
Yeah,
Just weird pre-challenge here that I didn't hate it, but I didn't really love any of it either. Other than the headband thing, because Nami had put a headband of their color on the immunity idol. And Probst just pulls a knife out of his pocket and cuts it off, which made me laugh. I don't know why, but
Well,
that
I
made me
guess
laugh.
now after the rice, Probe seems to carry around a knife in his pocket all the time.
Yeah. And like I thought the headband was funny, but I also thought Probst cutting it off and saying you don't own this was funny.
I
Get
agree. That was great.
getting into the challenge itself though, again, I mean, not a 500-pound gecko, but still, what a crazy challenge.
Yeah. I like this challenge because, like I said, taking it out of Australian Survivor, it really takes the whole tribe to really the tribe that works together the best is ultimately going to figure out how to do it the fastest.
Yeah,
And you see, it's a bad challenge for a tribe like Yanu that's still finding their footing in the game, and that you can tell is pretty divided right now.
and a real quick funny note: the puzzle at the end of it that they all have to do is one that like forms an arch. I have gone to the St. Louis Science Center many times over the years, especially with my mom. And there's this area there where they have something like this, where you build like a little smaller model of the St. Louis Arch with these blocks, and you're having to try to like hold both sides as you're going. Now, smaller scale, not a puzzle, and lighter blocks, but still kind of a cool comparison. That's what it made me think of.
Absolutely. Nice.
And so Nami wins once again, and in parentheses, I said put a headband on it again. And Siga finishes second again. And Yanu is once again last place in the immunity challenge.
Yeah.
And at the end of this challenge, before we get to the other thing, like towards the end of the challenge itself, before it's finished, I have a note here. Is here's what I wrote. It's I like Q, but him barking orders and yelling at people and being bossy the way he is towards the end of this challenge is not a good look.
Agree. he where we just said players like Banu and players like Venus might benefit from a tribe swap, Q might be the player in the most trouble if we have a tribe swap. Because the other tribes are noticing this.
Yeah, and he's in the numbers within his tribe, and he knows that. And I'm not gonna say he's on a power trip, but I'm definitely gonna say he realizes that he's in a good position.
Yeah.
And
As
then
we've seen so many times, whether they got through it or not, I'm thinking of players like Amber, players like Julia. We've seen how many times that you've been in a great position until Probst just changes things up.
yeah, and so see, we go to Nami right after the challenge, and they address this. Do you want to talk about the immunity idol thing now, or when we go back to camp?
Let's get into it.
So, and we didn't talk about it on our recap, but after the premiere, I saw plenty of clips on Twitter of this scene and Facebook maybe too. Plenty of clips on the internet of Probst handing Venus the immunity idol from the premiere episode challenge, and Soda just immediately taking it out of her hand and whatever she does with it, I think she hands it to someone else, but just immediately snatching it out of Venus's hands. Which last week seemed like a funny moment. You saw Venus's face and like, oh, she was kind of over that. People chuckled at it. It almost happens again this week. She tries, Venus holds on to it, but after everything we've seen this episode of how Venus feels very isolated and how that's wearing on her emotionally, and just kind of the way a lot of the tribe is treating her and just ignoring her. I don't know. This immunity idol thing hit in a completely different light than the funny way it did the first time, because it's happened twice now. And
It
again,
has.
this was the big one for me that I'm like, okay, this is not a good Soda episode. She's not
No,
coming off
agreed.
in the best light. But
It's it's also even to me like picked up as someone that I'm a big fan of soccer, and it's like you say something nice, love it, and it's like you say something about another team once and it's banter, but if you keep doing it, eventually they're gonna hate you.
yeah, and I liked Soda in the premiere. I feel like I'm hoping this isn't who she's going to be the rest of the season. I just didn't like her this episode, and that's fine. People can disagree with me if they want to. This annoyed me though with the immunity idol. But something a positive from this I wanted to get to after is that I feel like this really confirms the answer to a question that was in my head at the time, which was after the initial Venus and Randon conversation, I'm thinking, okay, is this actually going to be an alliance, or is this going to fade like the Venus and Soda thing from the premiere did? And we see this. I'm not going to say incident, but this little thing happened. Venus tries Soda. Soda tries to snatch the idol out of Venus's hand. Venus holds on to it this time, but she then tries to hand it to Randon, who's standing right behind Soda, and says this at a volume where I'm pretty sure she could hear it. Brandon says to Venus, like, no, you hold on to that. Everyone deserves to get to hold it. That moment right there is really cool. Just somebody finally showing her some respect, some attention, but standing up for her. I feel like that alliance is gonna stick a little bit because of that moment.
They definitely seem like they'll be a duo within that tribe. The question if they loses is can they pull in a third?
Yeah, and we've seen Liz, we've seen these two, we've seen Tevin and Soda, we've seen next to nothing from Hunter. And if they go to tribal, I feel like he's going to be the X factor. He's going to be the vote everyone wants.
Now, moving on, we have a loss from Yanu again. And Lily, though, that this I don't know if you have anything else, but this is my last kind of subject. Is I want to talk going into tribal about the immunity idol, or should I say, fake immunity idol? What did you think about this? And if I'm missing anything, feel free to jump in.
So basically, they're afraid Jess is gonna play her shot in the dark, and so this Yanu three of Q and Kenzie and Tiff think, hey, let's make a fake idol and give it to her so she won't play shot in the dark. Which, like, okay, but at the same time, just feels so unnecessary to me because in 5 previous seasons, shot in the dark has worked one time, and it was in the season that they hadn't seen when they filmed this. So the only thing these people know of shot in the dark is failure. It just, I don't know. It gave me the same vibe of David versus Goliath, where Allison's gonna be going home, and Angelina tries to give her this fake idol just to put on a show,
Yeah.
basically. And it's just like you're
Same
going
with
too
them.
far. Like, at what point? Like, this isn't necessary. It's a little bit mean, but and they try to hide it. And this was a little bit funny, just not finding it when they hit it right in front of her. But
Yeah.
and then when she's not around, they laugh at her for not being able to find it, which annoyed me a little bit. And just, I don't know. I felt like throughout all of this, and I have this written down, this group of three with Kenzie, Q, and Tiff really started to feel clicky to me and kind of high school, middle school with the jokes and the comments. And at some point, Tiffany says, "This is clown school." And somebody makes the comment, the three of us are the only ones in this tribe that know what we're doing. I just, this whole mess of a fake idol plan and the mess surrounding it, I wasn't a fan of, really.
I'm going to say, agree with you to an extent. I wasn't a fan of it. At the same time, this I can kind of see it to an extent because this is essentially, in a way, production getting a taste of their own medicine by taking so much emphasis off votes in order to have how many hidden advantages in the game right now.
Yeah. And the fake idol
So I'm
plan itself,
there as a counterpoint and go, there's so many ways to lose votes and mitigate votes and get an idol and nullify that idol and on and on and on, that at this point you almost have to assume that everybody can be sitting there with 5 advantages for all we know.
yeah, and the fake idol plan itself, I really didn't mind. It was just kind of something like, it felt unnecessary. And like, if I was playing, it's something I would not have done. It was all the drama and the middle schoolness, clickiness that surrounded it that I hated more than anything, honestly. The plan itself, I get it, especially with what you're saying, with all the advantages, you have to take matters into your own hands, and they did that, and it worked perfectly for them. I just didn't like the way they went about it, and at least production has gone back to only putting real advantages in play. Because with 44, we had production planted fake idols, which I didn't like that production was making fake idols. I like when players do it. Production doing it for 44 felt weird. How are you supposed to tell the fake ones from the real ones? I mean, you can't do that anyway, but production created fake idols was weird for me. I'm glad they did away with that after 44.
Yeah, right there with you.
But yeah, and so going into
Anything else you
tribal,
wanted to bring up before we get into power rankings?
yeah, so just a couple notes from tribal is I love Bonu so far. When
Yeah.
at camp he seems like such a positive, fun guy, but he's not good at tribal. He has, I'm not gonna say outbursts, but he has a bit of a flare up at tribal council where he gets heated and gets on a little bit of a rant. and then follows that up by walking up to each individual person of the tribe and asking them who he should vote for. And I want him to do well. And from the EW cast release, it seemed like he was going to be a really strong, really good player, but he falls apart at tribal council, and I hate that. Partially because I like him.
And that's one thing that I do like him too, and that's one thing that I feel bad for him in is if he's falling apart at tribal this early, tribal post merge and especially final tribal is only going to get worse.
I just hope, for my own sake, that he can last a little bit longer, so that either someone from hopefully Kevin's tribe, because he's 17 and 18 points ahead of us now. But in our little competition, that someone from one of your all's tribes goes first. Because I don't want to lose 2 out of the first 3 people. But we'll
That
see.
would be bad.
The other note I have is, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about, how Q comes off in the challenge. It's just not a good look. He starts giving Banu a survivor lesson mid tribal council, which on one hand I thought at first I thought was funny, and I put little laughing emojis on here. But right under that I put I like Q, but I'm realizing that he also comes off as like he can come off as being really condescending at times also. Because like I get Banu was a mess at tribal council, but him sitting like, do you see how you're like that can affect me? Do you not get that? Like, what if she has an idol and she writes my name down? That's on me. Like, do you get the repeated? Do you not get that? It's not a good look.
No. Like I said, my thoughts about Q is he's probably in the worst position if there's a swap. Because if he loses power, his social skills are going to get him in trouble. They're not very good.
No, they're not. Whereas someone like Venus, I think, could do really well in a swap. And Banu's kind of a wild card. I don't really know if a swap changes his trajectory any. I feel like that kind of might be set.
Depends if people need a vote.
Yeah. So going into best and worst, who do you have so far? And it's hard this early in the game, but
Player in the best position right now. Let me just go over this quickly. I'm sure once we get in later, it'll be a bit easier. Think I'm gonna go with Jem here.
interesting. I could see that.
And I think she's in that good spot where she has her stable alliance. She's on the tribe that seems to be the most unified, is very good at the game physically. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she does in the as the game gets a little more interesting is once we start getting rid of more people.
Are Jen and Mariah a thing? Like, are they each other's number one?
Sense, but it's hard to tell this early.
Yeah, because like I know we saw the really big Charlie and Mariah scene. I know Jem and Mariah are both in Charlie's Angels with the other two, and we saw a few scenes of them together, but we didn't really get that big scene like we did from the other two. I am staying in Siga Tribe for player in the best position, though, and I'm going with my player of the week, Charlie. We talked about him and Maria a lot. Even outside of the Charlie's Angel thing with him and the girls, though, Tim and Ben both like him a lot. Both have bonds there, and neither one of them is gonna. Nobody on that tribe wants to go after Charlie at all. Like, if Siga loses the immunity challenge next week, I feel like there's a 0% chance Charlie goes home based on the information we have right now. So shout out to him. Who do you have for being in the worst position?
I think I have to go with Banu here, unfortunately.
Yeah, me
And
too.
he's just on he's on the outs of the worst tribe. And the preview didn't tell us the word swap. So in my mind, that's why I say I think a swap would help him. It just can't get any worse. Sometimes different is just better than the same.
And he's not helping himself either because he was already outside of the numbers because the other three have such a tight click going on that Jess and Banu were just outside of the numbers. But his poor performance at Tribal Council, that little flare up where he gets kind of heated, that worsens his case, I feel like. But I feel like he might be able to survive it because we saw a strong push for Kenzie. And we saw Q consider that a little bit. And there were multiple times throughout this episode where I thought Kenzie was playing way too hard. She's trying to fake work with the other two and wants to pretend like voting Q off, which like you don't need to do that this early. I don't know. Kenzie's playing really hard, and I feel like it might come back to bite her soon.
I also noticed something though too next week that might, in my mind, still give Banu a little bit of a chance, and that's the episode title.
What is it?
Doodles win.
Oh, nice.
Well, is that tribe about to maybe pull off an upset? Let's wait and see when we're back here in 7 days on the third episode of Tribal Council Chat for the season.
True. And so, really quick, before I forget, before we go into a line blindside first boot, our show has kind of a cool announcement. We have merch, sort of, very limited amount. We have Tribal Council Chat stickers. It's our logo, our profile picture on Facebook and Instagram. Or if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, the little picture that pops up with the episode. We have stickers of that. So if you want one, shoot us a message on Facebook. Shoot us a message on Instagram at tribalcouncil.chat and we will mail you a sticker. They're free. So if you want a little piece of merch, that's all we have is stickers. But if you want that, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. We'd love to send one out to you.
So, a line blindside first boot. Who you got?
This is an interesting one. I went with. Do you have one?
I do.
Go ahead while I think.
So last week you went with players of Asian descent. And so this week
I went with players who were not born in USA.
Not born. Yeah, sorry. I remembered cowboy, and for some reason I was thinking. I went with players of Hispanic descent, though, is where that was going. And I'm kind of proud of myself. I kind of brought the heat on this one and made it difficult. So the first name you've got is someone that doesn't need an introduction other than that she is the queen. You've got Sandra Diaz-Twine, a two-time winner. With the second person, you've got a new era player who did not win, but that's only because he had no threat level management and lost in fire. If he had been able to get someone to take him to the end, he wins. And even without winning, I feel like he was one of the best players of the new era, Jesse Lopez. And with the third one, you've got someone who's high up on my winner rankings, all the way up at number 11 as my list of favorite winners. And the person who I feel like is the best player of the new era, D. Valladares.
Great picks. You've given me two winners here. Well, that means, and you've given me one amazing player who's not winner. So
yeah, two winners and Jesse. So if you're not winning this,
no,
we're
I'm
not winning this season of Survivor, no matter what.
So I am going to align with my fellow political scientist in Jesse. I am going to blindside Sandra just because I really want to see her be a Joe once.
Yeah.
And that leaves me to first boot D for no reason other than there's just nothing else left.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to align with Jesse because he's the only non-winner here and realize I'm still going to lose if me and him go to the end together. But to be honest, no matter who I'm aligning with these three, if one of them is at the end with me, I'm not winning anyway. I do want to see Sandra as a juror, so I will blindside her, which leads me to first boot D, which I hate because I absolutely love D, but it's the only spot left.
Nice. Love those picks. So my player of the not player of the week, but my like player in the top spot, I picked as Gem. So I am gonna give you three players that represent somewhere that I think you despise called Chicago, Illinois,
Yeah, okay.
being her hometown. So that means that your options for Align Blindside First Boot are from Survivor 41, Xander Hastings,
Okay.
from Survivor Kagion, um, Spencer Bledsoe,
Ooh.
and from Survivor Ghost Island, Stephanie Johnson.
I'm gonna align with Xander because it's been proven that you can align with him and go to the end and win because he got 0 votes.
Yeah.
And I guess the time Spencer went to the end, he got 0 votes also. But I feel more confident that I can beat Xander than Spencer. I will blindside Spencer though, because his personality is amazing to watch on the jury. Which leads me to first booting Stephanie, which I don't like because she was really fun, but have to first boot someone. It can't be Francesca every season.
Makes sense. I am going to first boot Xander. Sure what else he would offer, and I think some of the way he played the game might be a little dangerous to ally with.
Fair.
I'm gonna ally with Steph. I think she had a lot more game, but just got cut short based on how dominant Wendell and Dominic were in that game.
For sure.
And that leaves me to, like you said, blindside Spencer as he is a great juror.
For sure. This was a fun episode.
It was. Make sure to follow Tribal Council Chat on Facebook and on Twitter. Where episodes go up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. And grab your torches and head back to camp.
Hit us up for stickers if you want one. Bye, guys.